I've been asking people online, in real life, at the grocery store, just to be obnoxious. Who is better at his job? Brock Purdy, Kyle Shanahan? This could tear a family apart. What do you think? Will we still be friends at the end of this conversation is the question.
Probably. You should have made it a poll in the chat. I'm curious to see what they think.
I'll make it a poll in the chat right now.
Here's what I'll say. I bet you most people are going to say Brock.
I made it a poll on YouTube and 52% of people said Brock. So you're right.
Okay. I would think the majority would say Brock. And the reason that I think that is because
it's the right answer.
If there's ever a point where Kyle and Brock butt heads, fans are going to side with Brock, and that'll be the point where they would turn on Kyle. That's the only time that they would turn on Kyle, is if they have to choose between he and Brock. And I think that would be the right choice to choose Brock. Right now, I would say, based off of what the expectations are, what I do know is Brock, in one opportunity in the Super Bowl, met the expectation. If you were going into the Super Bowl and you said, all right, this is what I need from CMC, I would say he didn't meet the expectation. I would say the same thing about Trent, Debo, Kittle, Ayuk, Kyle Shanahan. I would not have said that about Brock. I think he did meet the expectation that I would have had of him going into the Super Bowl. So I think right now, Brock, at least in big time moments, has been better at his job. I also remember leaving the Packers game, and one of the first things I said in that post game was the 49ers won in spite of Kyle tonight. I really felt that way against the Packers. Brock was a big reason why they did win in spite of Kyle. So I think that Brock right now is meeting the expectation of his job better than Kyle. Now, when the expectations raise and he gets paid, I don't know. I think that'll be a debate again. But in this moment, I think he's definitely doing his job better than Brock, or better than Kyle, rather.
I agree. I think he does his job better than Kyle. I think this is a new position for Kyle to be in. He's always been able to say, like, look, buddy, don't get too big of a head. I'm the reason that you're considered good. But that's not the case with Brock. I think everyone realizes that there's a lot of things that he brings to the table that are purely him. His poise is purely, Kyle doesn't have it. Kyle doesn't have Brock's poise. He's 24 years old. The mobility helps the Niners offense so much. He has such a good feel for when to leave the pocket, and he's good at escaping pressure. That's not Kyle. And the big one is that, and you mentioned it, at least not yet, Brock is not a choker. He's not a choker. In fact, he won a fairly large bowl game at Iowa State. I mean, you know,
I would say he's the opposite. Yeah, he beat the Oregon Ducks, yes.
He beat the Oregon Ducks. So he's won a big bowl game. He's not a freaking choker. And until proven otherwise, Kyle is a 3-time choker. 3 times. So is Brock perfect? No. Taking him. I trust him more than I trust Kyle. Because Brock's going to be the same guy every single day. Who the hell is Kyle when the pressure's on the line? I don't know.
Well,
smile.
We did see a very pressure situation. This was kind of my issue with Chris Sims and his ranking. I think Sims is extremely smart. I love that he walks you through why he picks the order that he picks. I have no issue with that. But he did a really good job of talking about Brock's struggles and talking about the Packer game in particular, and then somehow glossed over the fact that when they needed it most, he came through. He did exactly what he was supposed to do.
Jordan Love didn't.
Right. And Kyle Shanahan doesn't either. Kyle Shanahan has not done it either. And so just because of that, I would say that Brock Purdy has met expectations and he's doing his job at a high level. So yeah, definitely it's Brock right now.
I feel like it's been hard for me to get my mind around it because I cover Jimmy, and the default thought process is, well, Kyle's propping up this quarterback. He's mid. Kyle's great. Without Kyle, he'd be nothing. But I think with Brock, it's almost opposite. Like, if Brock were never born, would Kyle still be the head coach of this team? I don't know. I'm not sure. He might be. Like, maybe if he had pulled off a trade for Aaron Rodgers or Kirk Cousins, but his tenure was on life support and Brock Purdy emerged like freaking King Arthur. So I gotta say that right now, Brock is not a coach. He's a coach saver. Captain save a coach is what they should call him.
I like that. Do you think, and I don't know if we discussed this last week, all my shows blur together sometimes, but the Chris Sims, the ranking of Brock Purdy at 17, there was a little blurb in there when he was talking about Brock, and he said, when I talked to Kyle, and everybody kind of glossed over that. Do you think that a lot of what he said about Brock is coming directly from Kyle? And he's just kind of
I
throwing it
would
out there
think
as his
probably,
opinion?
but also like they know each other so well. I think he probably knows how Kyle thinks, or thinks he knows how Kyle thinks,
Maybe.
because he does know how Kyle thinks. So there's that. But yeah, I'm sure they talk at least once a year, and they talk about football off the record. I would think so.
Yeah. I don't know. I thought that whole thing was interesting. Like I
But
said,
that
I think
annoys me because
he's smart,
again,
but
Kyle, he always wants to have someone he can point the finger at. Always wants to put himself above the quarterback, and I don't like that. I mean,
he did it to
can't
Brock
do
his
that with
rookie
Brock.
year. He did it
Brock's
to
more
he
popular
already
than
did
you.
it.
He's better at his job than you. Embrace him, and don't start whispering to your friends that like, he's kind of like. Sims' argument was, well, if Brock was really a top 10 quarterback, they would have won the Super Bowl. And it's like, I like your logic, but I think you're applying it to the wrong person. You should be applying it to Kyle. If Kyle's really a top 5 head coach, top 10 head coach, he would have won the Super Bowl. Travarius Ward said yesterday the Niners were the more talented team. You know why? Because they were. You know how you lose when you have the more talented team? You get outcoached. Simple as that. Andy Reid is way better than Kyle. Way better. And I know it's easy to say Patrick Mahomes is way better than Purdy, but like, not in that one game. Purdy held his own. Was he as good as Mahomes? No, of course not. But he was pretty good considering the fact that his run game wasn't working, his pass protection wasn't working, his number one receiver couldn't get open. Thought he held his own.
Do you think the gap between Andy Reid and Kyle is bigger than the gap between Mahomes and Purdy?
I do. What do you think?
I don't know that it is. I think Mahomes is so special, man. I mean,
Might be the best
gap between
ever.
him and Allen is pretty significant at this point. You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't know. Purdy's good, but Mahomes is just something special. I would say the gap between him and Mahomes is bigger than what it is between Kyle and Andy Reid at this point.
And this is interesting too, because like the perception with Andy Reid is he's great, but he's got a great quarterback, and his quarterback is better than him. Like everyone agrees, Mahomes is better at his job than Reid is at his. And Reid doesn't fight it. He's like, I want the best quarterback. Yeah, it's all Patrick. That's kind of his whole demeanor. Hey, aw shucks, I'm not a big ego guy. It's all the players. Kyle hasn't reached that point yet. Like he's very much like Brock's the real deal. He's a hell of a quarterback. But I'm the star. But I like Brock. He's really good. But I'm the freaking star of this team, in case you didn't know. And that's too. He needs to outgrow that. It's not good for Brock. You don't have Mahomes. You could have had Mahomes. You didn't want Mahomes, but you got Brock. So you can't do that stuff anymore.
I think Brock transcends things mentally though too. And I just don't know that it bothers Brock. I don't know that there's a lot that rattles Brock. I really don't. I mean, listen, you can talk about the Ravens game or you know, when it gets rainy or whatever. Maybe the rain, maybe that's like the kryptonite, because that does seem to be a little bit mental. But you know, sometimes I think that players on other teams just do better and out execute and are better on the day. I don't know that Brock is ever going to fold mentally. I don't know that you're ever going to look back in his career and be like, he would have done it, but he folded mentally. Now, maybe physically he can't make some of the throws, or, you know, I can see that scenario, but I don't know that you're ever going to say he folded mentally. And we've already seen Kyle fold mentally multiple times in big situations.
What's interesting too, like Purdy struggled against the Ravens big time. Horrible game. But another person got his ass kicked that day, and it was Kyle. Like Kyle got his ass kicked so splendiferously, so gloriously, schematically by Mike McDonald. The Seahawks hired Mike McDonald so he can face Kyle Shanahan twice a year. He got Mike McDonald hired with that performance. And,
yeah,
you know, Spagnuolo kicked his ass in the Super Bowl too. Kicked his ass. Kyle wanted to hire him after. Can you teach me? Teach me what you did. No, I'm going to stay over here. Keep beating you. Thanks. Yeah.
Well,
Anyway.
and he hasn't beaten who's the Browns defensive coordinator. He's 0 for against
Schwartz.
him. He's like 0 for 4 against Schwartz.
Schwartz. Yeah.
Man. I don't know.
The Schwartz is very strong with that one. I'm sorry. Spaceballs.
Dallas has a new defensive coordinator. I think that might cause some problems.
Who is it?
We've got Minnesota's old head coach,
Okay.
Zimmer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. We'll see.
Dallas still gonna get
Fangio's
smoked
with
by
the
the
Eagles.
Niners, though.
Fangio's with
That
the
team.
Eagles.
That team.
McDonald with Seattle. Fangio with the Eagles. Zimmer with Dallas. Things might
Brandon
get
Staley with the Niners.
Hey, I forgot about that. Yep, good call.
You ever talk to a Chargers fan about Brandon Staley?
Yeah, I've talked to Chargers fans about Brandon Staley. They think he's garbage. They hate him.
They'll say he's like one of the worst coaches in NFL history. They'll go that far.
Yeah. Somebody broke it down. I forget what I was watching, but they were talking about Herbert and they were going through all the coaches he's had since college. Mario Cristobal, terrible. Who was the guy that went to Florida State and couldn't even make it through a whole season? Taggart, terrible. Ooh. Mark Helfrich was the best coach he's had. Helfrich was the best coach he's had since college. Absolutely terrible coaching, and he's finally got a good coach. I'm curious to see what it looks like.